figuring out the optimal pathway was one of the hardest problems I think we've had to solve. Do not be afraid to put out your MVP, your V1 into the world. Got some feedback from early users who told me, wow, it's interesting, but it kind of sucks. And it hurt. But everything they were saying was right.
This is the Future of the Future show. I am your host, Mateo Berbejicio. Welcome to another episode of the Future of the Future podcast. Today we are exploring the journey from engineer to founder and what it takes to turn years of technical experience into a company solving meaningful problems. My guest is Kamil Mansuri, a technologist and entrepreneur who has worked at companies like Comcast, Take-Two Interactive, and Vapor.io, building systems at scale before eventually launching his own startup. In this conversation, we talk about how Kamil first got into technology, the formative experiences that shaped his career, and the technical and leadership skills he developed along the way. We also dive into the origin story of Telepath, the problem it aims to solve, the challenges of building it, and what it takes to lead a team and create a strong culture as a founder. Finally, we reflect on the lessons from his journey and the advice he will give to aspiring tech founders who want to build impactful products. Camille, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mateo. Great to be on.
What first drew you into technology?
It's a good question. So I would say if I was to boil it down, it would be my love of building things and my love of tinkering and my love of learning. Um, Really just playing around early days with dating myself here with Basic, and then later on with Windows with Visual Basic, building little tools and didn't know it at the time, automations to kind of help move things along. And it really was a gateway and enablement for me to play PC games. To be honest, at that age, that's all I cared about. I wanted to make sure I can get to the game as quickly as possible. And so a lot of what I did was to help enable those things. And that continued on actually very early days, like in college, where I actually was building mods for popular PC games such as Half-Life and other games, building websites. But what's kind of interesting about this is that's not the career path I chose. I'm actually a business and finance major. So I've been working for big financial companies for about half my career. And so it's kind of interesting, but you gain that perspective later in life where it's really, really fun and cool to build things that you want to build. But is it really solving anything? Is it really helping anybody else? And so that's kind of the core of maybe the rest of my journey. But yeah, I would say it's just I love tinkering, and it's been a really fun way for me to just build things and see them come to life.
So when you were starting out, this wasn't at first at least your job or your education path.
Yeah.
So when you were starting out, how did you go about learning the skills that matter most, and what were the formative experiences that shaped your path?
Yeah. So in terms of the actual learning path, so I always highly recommend anybody that's interested in anything take a course on things like Coursera or MITx or just any of these available amazing programs that they have and they've had for many, many years at this point. Something that I really wanted for myself was to be a more disciplined programmer. I knew when I was working in finance that I wanted to go into programming. I wanted to be a software engineer. Um, Took me a very long time to get full circle to that moment, but once I realized it, I realized there was a lot of things that I needed to learn, patterns I needed to learn. I needed to learn best practices in software development. So Coursera and these other companies have been really helpful in getting these early certifications, these early credentials, um, so that if you are transitioning from a career in finance where you might have been successful into something that is the great unknown, which is software engineering, wildly different, that you feel confident, you don't have that imposter syndrome, but you also can demonstrate that, hey, I have a credential here, get me an interview. And so that did help me early on in my career. kind of shaping those things, just making sure that I had all of the fundamentals. And when I did end up transitioning to software engineering, I was able to be successful at it. Um, I would say the skill that mattered most, and I kind of touched on this, it's problem solving. And so I kind of learned when I was working at the banks I was working at, financial companies, but also when I transitioned into my first role as a software engineer, that you're no longer building for fun necessarily, unless you're doing some greenfield work or R&D work. You're building to solve a problem. And it's usually a very, very difficult problem that you're solving. And it's a problem that many customers are looking for a solution. And so you're in the business now of developing for solutions. And so that for me was very formative. That was a very important skill to learn and mindset shift that I needed to change.
Um, so looking back at your time in companies like Comcast, Vapor, etc., what were the most important technical or leadership skills that you developed that you prepared you for founding your own startup, right? So that journey from
Yeah.
engineer to founder.
I would say I would say for me it would be designing and operating large scale systems. Not going from just building small APIs and small integrations and automations, to building things that are very, very large scale within a country or within global scope. So for example, like you're basically solving these hard problems with actual like real world constraints. So for example, like Comcast, I was responsible for, before Comcast actually had a formalized reliability engineering team, I was responsible for automation and actually supporting their change management process when they were really just starting out to develop and deploy these things. And who is to the surgical world is blame, right? Who is to blame when an outage happens? How can we automatically notify stakeholders? And I was part of teams that were supporting NBC Sports, where things were very mission critical there, and Xfinity Business, which again, mission critical. You cannot have an outage there. And if you do have outages in any of these scopes, you need to make sure that you're pushing these notifications over to stakeholders so that customers can be immediately either notified, or we have some sort of automation in place to help resolve and bridge those things. At Take Two, I was actually involved with their early days where they were building up their mobile division. And so now they have a very robust mobile division. They acquired Zynga and they've been building that up. But really at the start, I was brought in to help unify their mobile backends. And so their games span globally and they're massive, massive games. And so the idea was to build a unified architecture so that we can engage with players in real time. Um, Again, a global scope problem. And when I was hired at Vapor was a co-location business. We had about 30 plus data centers across the United States and expanding to Europe. And at the time, I was brought in to help with the transformation into an AI data center, an AI business. And really, that was done early days of AI. And we had to build this from scratch and understand and learn how the intricacies of NVIDIA GPUs and really get really into low level problem solving. But again, across all three, these are large scale problems and problems where we're taking kind of a relatively new technology and adapting it in some ways and evolving those technologies.
So, what motivated you to make the leap from engineering leadership roles into founding your own company? And was there a particular insight or problem you felt compelled to solve?
Yeah, I would say so. Earlier in my software engineering career, I was actually solving for some of these problems related to SIP and RTP and really all things VoIP. And I was working for mobile startups that were solving very hard problems in this space, with a combined total of 20 million distributed users globally. And so these were really, really hard problems, but they were also problems that impacted in real time a lot of users. And I really enjoyed my work working with those companies. um, but I think really the genesis of this was that even though I hadn't been working for a couple years in that space, I went to NVIDIA GTC conference in, actually, I think it's happening very soon, the next one. I went to a couple of them and I did go browsing through the startup alley and talking to a lot of founders that were in the voice AI space. Happened to see a lot of those
Yeah.
and I saw a lot of demos. And really, something that stood out to me and something that I had worked with my previous startups was building these WebRTC gateways and bridges. And I noticed that they were perfect. All the calls, All the voice agents were sounding incredible. These companies clearly have evolved and made some great strides in this space. But I noticed that it was just calls happening from a computer. Like they
Yeah.
were literally clicking a button on their computer and it was making a call. I'm like, huh, all right, what about phone calls, right? Because I was thinking the way you're engaging with AI voice agents and some of the pain points that customers like you and I have when engaging with AI voice agents on the phone, or we're talking over the phone and it doesn't sound super great. I did find a couple of folks at the GDC I went to in California and also at the one in Washington, D.C., that were demonstrating this live over a phone. So I listened to those voice demos and they kind of acknowledged and they surfaced a problem that I had already kind of known about, but now it was very clear that this was an actual problem. They don't sound super great. And it's not the fault of these AI voice agent companies. They've built robust technology and they've built these pipelines really with AI voice agents. And just to unpack a little bit about what an AI voice agent actually is, it's actually a suite of software that takes speech to text, an LLM in the center, and text to speech. And
Right.
fundamentally, all AI voice agents operate in that same model. And so you can make those three things as perfect as you can. But if you're connecting to an AI phone system that is 150 years old, that's been iterated on over the last century and a half, it's going to sound and operate in unpredictable ways. So I realized there is a problem here that I might be able to solve. So I started prototyping in my hotel room and I got to a certain point and I realized, okay, this is a very hard problem to solve, which means it's going to be interesting. Let me talk to some people. And so that's how I kind of got started into that and kind of leapt into that particular space.
Which leads us to the origin story of Telepath. Can you tell us
Yeah.
that? It's a great segue to tell that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I founded Telepath to solve this hard problem. Um, I went back to the hotel room, like I said, and I started testing some of these calls with a phone number. I used Telnix, I used Twilio directly into 11 Labs. I used 11 Labs documentation. I used some of these other AI providers' documentations and kind of confirmed my suspicions and realized, okay, there are ways to do this, but I need to think about how the phone network connects to these systems.
Yeah.
What is the most elegant and graceful path? And so that idea formed the business that now is called Telepath. And Telepath is infrastructure that literally will bridge these phone calls into these AI voice agents at scale. And the theory behind this is that Telepath aims to support all AI voice agents and all phone carriers globally. It's pretty ambitious. Um, but the way it works fundamentally is that we are bridging these calls, which is SIP and RTP, into these AI voice agents. And these AI voice agents speak WebSockets, they speak different protocols, but they fundamentally speak data. So we take this voice information, we do a normalization, and we do certain things to kind of help send these packets along to the AI voice agent as quickly as humanly possible. And what happens then is these AI voice agents are able to respond in kind, but the response goes back to us, and we shift those packets again at the fastest possible speed back to the originator, the user, who might be on a phone call, any sort of phone, PBX system, a cell phone, interplaced with really bad service. But we're able to optimize for both pathways. That is why we sit right in the center. The other thing we solve for is full end-to-end observability, so that these businesses that are deploying on Telepath are able to see both legs of the call. In fact, if there are multiple legs of a call, if your AI voice agent needs to call out to another AI voice agent and another, we're able to help bridge that gap and able to show you the end-to-end of all calls, including jitter, latency, mean opinion score, any sort of telemetry that you can think of is presented per call. And we have a really strong retention policy as well. But yeah, that is kind of the core of what we built Telepath to solve, and that's what we're aiming to do. I could actually add one more thing. And so on this journey with interoperability, we also realized that we want to make this easier for customers, easier for our customers, our businesses, but we want these businesses to be able to deploy in Telepath as quickly as possible. But it's very ambitious to say we want to support all AI voice providers. To that end, we've actually started developing standards, and we want to build the actual de facto standard for connecting SIP into an AI voice agent. And so that starts in the next week or so. We're going to be drafting the standard and we're going to be showcasing how this can actually function and work in a way that is very, very simple and anyone can adopt it.
I love it. So when you were developing Telepath, what were some of the biggest technical challenges you faced, and how did you decide on the core features and architecture to set it apart?
Yeah. Well, the hardest part, I would say, is the problem itself. And so kind of use that 150-year of telco iteration as an example there. And really what we're doing, stripping all that away, that system was designed for humans to talk to other humans.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really designed for humans to talk to machines at and for machines to interpret what humans are saying over these legacy systems. And so figuring out the optimal pathway was one of the hardest problems I think we've had to solve, and we're still solving it, right? We've gotten to a place where it sounds really, really good, and our interruptibility, as we call it internally, where if you're talking to an AI voice agent and you're, let's say, asking it for top sushi restaurants in your area, and you realize, no, I want ramen, no, I want pizza, no, I
Yeah.
just want fast food, it will immediately, at the speed that the LLM and the entire pipeline can operate, send your response back. We can do better. I think over the next month, over the next 6 months, over the next year, we're going to see vast improvements in that responsiveness as we continue to optimize. So it's a hard problem to solve, and that was the biggest problem. The second biggest challenge is that we're not using an off-the-shelf SIP gateway, and that would have been the easy path. But
Yeah.
the reason we built our own, and this is a very, very large undertaking, if you've ever done it, just really build your own robust gateway, is that in the nature of which Telepath operates, we need to inspect every single packet because we operate on the packet level, and we are sending this data off in a way that each provider, let's say it's an AI voice agent provider, um, at the maximum fidelity we can send it, at the best quality. And over time, we may want to do even further optimizations on that voice, right, to help steer that along. But again, that is something we don't feel like we need to do at this point because these systems with 11 Labs, with Cartesia, with others are so sophisticated. They're able to handle the speed at which we're sending this data.
Right.
So another big problem. So, but with that problem, right, comes supporting all sorts of complex SIP related things, and we want to be able to handle all of it because again, being able to hand off a call from one AI agent to another AI agent to a human back to an AI agent. These complex workflows are things our customers are using right now, and we want to be able to support all of those out of the box.
So, as a founder and as a leader, what traits or leadership practices have you leaned on the most when building your team and shaping the culture at Telepath?
That's a good question. I would say something that drove me earlier when I was a software engineer, and even before I formally became a software engineer, was curiosity. I think what we're building here and the problems that we're trying to solve require us to think out of the box, to be curious, to say, hey, this is not possible, but is there a better path? We live in a world right now where we have access to the smartest, most capable AI on earth, and we can ask it anything, and it will help drive some of those conversations with AI and for us to do research and investigate. But it's up to us as engineers, up to us as people in this operating this space to really understand how can we actually do this? Is it even possible? And how do we actually get to the art of possible? Right. So that curiosity piece is really, really important in Telepath, and it's something I really deeply value in my peers as well. The other aspect I would say would be adaptability. Like if we're going to support all these phone carriers, well, that is a really ambitious thing to declare out in the world. How do you do it? Now, being adaptable to me is being able to pivot tactically, being able to adjust your expectations, but eventually getting to those original expectations. So, for that example, because we can't, it's very, very hard. And I'll give you a real example. OpenAI, for example, uh, they don't have the same type of system that 11 Labs and others do. And so for you to actually originate an AI voice agent call to OpenAI at the current moment, you actually need to pre-configure everything, send a massive JSON packet to OpenAI and say, I want this. This is the entire LLM system prompt. You're sending all of that data for just a single call. And so there's no persistence of an AI voice agent. That's actually something we can build, sure, like in a UI and have our users type all that out, but it clashes against our keep it easy, keep it simple, right? Principle. And that is actually one of the core reasons why we're building the standard is actually sort of a response to how OpenAI is handling this. We feel OpenAI could do better, and I know they can, and I want the standard to kind of be in place. And so that adaptability aspect really gave birth to this idea of developing a standard. And so those are two traits I'm kind of that kind of rattling around in my brain in terms of core to like leadership practices for us.
I love it. Curiosity, adaptability, both very, very important. Looking back in your journey, what's one lesson you wish you could tell your younger self? And what advice will you give to aspiring tech founders who might be listening and want to build impactful products?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I do some introspection. I reflect on this every now and then because I've been building things for a really long time, even though I don't always realize it. Um, and I don't realize it because these were things I built for myself. These weren't things I necessarily shipped out in the world. And if I was to really unpack why, I would say fear. And it's a very hard thing for any engineering leader or maybe any engineer to really admit. But sometimes we're afraid to put things out into the world. We might be afraid that it might not be taken well, that maybe it's full of bugs, maybe it's only useful to me, right? So let's build fast and let's be fearless. If I was to give a quote, and if we're by fearless, I mean do not be afraid for feedback. Do not be afraid to put out your MVP, your V1 into the world. You know, there's all these companies that are applying to Y Combinator right now. There's a season going on. I mean, these are fearless companies that are putting out their prototypes, their MVPs, their ideas out into the world, and it's hard. What you're doing is hard. The problem you're solving is harder, but just having the will to do it, I think, and that fearlessness to put it out in the world. I'll give you a real example. This is recent. So about a year ago, I decided I as a developer, I work a lot in Markdown, and I also sometimes build diagrams and system architecture in Mermaid. And I developed a Mac app for myself. Again, that mindset of just building things for fun, tinkering. This was not something I intended for production. This is something I built for me because I wanted to, and I'd never built a Mac app before, and I wanted to learn Swift using AI to some degree, but I was able to actually learn enough Swift to really make sure I can debug and write tests and really explore the APIs. So I put that out into the world. I actually posted on Reddit about the app and made it free and got some feedback from early users who told me, "Wow, it's interesting, but it kind of sucks," and it hurt. It hurt a little because I like using it, but everything they were saying was right in that, wow, it was kind of janky. Okay, I needed to actually iterate on this a little bit more. So I took their advice. I started iterating on it in my free time, nights, weekends. This wasn't a core thing I was working on. This was a side project. Fast forward to today, it's excellent. It's in such good shape. And it is because of all of the feedback I've gotten, all of the support tickets, all of the support from passionate users that really want this app to succeed. Willed that success into existence by just me being fearless and putting heart in my sleeve and saying, I'm going to listen to this feedback, not cry about it. Let me actually try to do better. And it's in a place now where it's excellent. And I think there's always going to be that degree of fear when you put out something into the world that it's not perfect. But I think Reid Hoffman said it best, right? I'm going to screw up his quote, but if you're not embarrassed by your first version or MVP you've shipped too late, maybe that holds true. So my advice is be fearless and build and ship.
I love it. And then the path really becomes the reward, and the path becomes that shipping early and being fearless. That is going to give you the feedback you need to make the best product, right? So
Yeah,
it's there's no way around it. You just have to do it.
exactly right.
Camille, Thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for taking the time. I want to stay tuned. I want to see where Telepath continues going and your trajectory. So let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks, Mateo.